Listen, it's 9:32. Why don't we get rolling? I think we typically are going to probably see a few more folks trickle in, but want to welcome everybody to our third webinar in our series on the changes around cookies and what destination marketers, particularly our friends in Idaho, need to be thinking about as we continue to go forward. We've got another great speaker with us today, so I'm going to hand it over to Hannah to introduce Tim, but want to remind everybody, please keep yourself muted. We will be muting you from this end as well, but again, we're going to ideally try to save some time for questions. If you do have questions, feel free to chat them. Also, we can unmute folks, raise your hand, whatever it is, and we'll, get to you when we get toward the end. But certainly feel free to send questions through via chat. And yeah, looking forward to a great day today. So Hannah, I'm going to hand it over to you. And thanks everybody for joining us again.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'm super excited. We are here with Tim Pogge. So as we continue our conversation around the importance of understanding first-party data, a great tool to collect that information is through email marketing. So today with Tim Pogge, he's going to shed some light on the recent privacy changes and regulations that are impacting our industry. So Tim, just a little bit of background. I know he's going to introduce himself again, but Tim is a sales engineer supervisor at SharpSpring by Constant Contact. And so if any of you guys are familiar with those terms, SharpSpring is an email marketing platform and Constant Contact is also an email marketing platform. They just merged into one recently, so they are going to be one and the same. But Tim has spent many years as a technical support specialist, and he has extensive knowledge of email marketing and SharpSpring suite of tools. And so we're really excited that he's going to be able to shed some light on how email marketing can be a really great tool to collect first-party data. So with that, I will pass it over to Tim.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Hannah and the team, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And as Hannah said, my name is Timothy Pogge. I am the Sales Engineer Supervisor for SharpSpring from Constant Contact. And today we're going to discuss some changes that are obviously coming to digital marketing and sales industries, and how marketers can ensure that they can continue to evolve with these changing times. So as we said, I am the Sales Engineer Supervisor. I joined SharpSpring about 5 years ago as a technical support engineer. And over the past 5 years, I've worked to support our customers with their email marketing, to ensure better deliverability, better inboxing. And I grew into a sales engineering role where I now help marketers understand how they can implement their marketing strategies with our solution. So that's kind of a little bit of background about me. Again, I've been with the company now for 5 years, and I've been really excited to learn and to grow in this really exciting industry. Now, first thing I want to do is go over a bit of an agenda. So let's take a look at that. There are a lot of things we could discuss today, but we have a short period of time, so I'm going to try and do my best to stay on topic and to keep it focused. But I tend to ramble a little bit, so keep me honest, keep me focused, and I'll do my best. So first, I wanted to go over who is SharpSpring. Second, after that, I want to talk a little bit about what are cookies. I know this is going to be a bit of a recap for a number of you, but I think it's beneficial that we all kind of start from the same page. Third, I wanted to touch on what's changing. We've all heard about the imminent death of cookies, but what does that actually entail? Fourth, I want to go over what factors are driving these changes. And then finally, and most importantly, what can marketers actually do, right? As a marketer, how can you prepare? What best practices can you begin to implement? And how can that help ensure growth for your organizations? So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so first, what is SharpSpring? Well, SharpSpring by Constant Contact is a marketing automation and CRM solution that is focused on SMBs. So to be brief, our solution is built for small and medium-sized businesses to essentially try and replace many of the tools that they've historically been using with one solution. So that's a brief rundown. I'm not here to sell, obviously, our solution, but just to give you an understanding of who we are and where we fit into the marketplace. SharpSpring was founded in 2012. As of September of this past year, we have been acquired by Constant Contact. We're really excited to join the Constant Contact family, and we're slowly integrating our two organizations and our solutions. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, That's who we are. For those of you who are, you're going to see some changes coming down the pipeline that we're all very excited about. All right, let's dive in. So first thing let's talk about is cookies, right? I just want to real quickly address what are cookies actually, because I think that many of you, again, may already be very familiar with this topic, but I think it's very beneficial that we all kind of started off on the same page. So a cookie is basically a small file, a small computer file, oftentimes including a unique identifier that a web server sends to a browser. These files can then be sent back to the server each time a browser requests a new page, and it's a tool that a website can use to remember you. It remembers your online habits, remembers your preferences. Now, there are different types of cookies. So for simplicity's sake today, we're just going to address first-party and third-party cookies. But if you really want to get into the weeds, there's all kinds of different cookies with different purposes. But specifically for today, first and third-party cookies will be the focus to keep it simple. First-party cookies are directly stored by the website that you're visiting and enable the website owner to collect analytical data, to store language settings, passwords, and to provide dynamic content that is more relevant to each visitor than what may otherwise be visible on the page. So really, first-party cookies are meant to be tools that help improve a visitor's experience and provide valuable insight to marketers as well as sales professionals. Whereas a third-party cookie, on the other hand, is a cookie that is set by a third party, hence the name. So, for example, AdWall is a retargeting solution that leverages third-party cookies very heavily. And so third-party cookies are accessible on any site that loads the third-party cookie server's code. They're generally used for marketing purposes such as retargeting and tend to track an individual consumer across multiple websites in order to deliver that kind of targeted advertising. And that really goes into what's going away. So when we hear about that impending doom of cookies, what people are actually referring to are those third-party cookies, right? We are doing this. These changes are being driven in large part by the industry, but also by regulatory items. And we're going to get into that in a moment. These changes are definitely being applauded by privacy groups. According to Apple, who's already blocked third-party cookies in Safari, these are a part of their effort, as well as folks with Google and Mozilla, to help protect their consumers' privacy. Apple initially began this effort in 2017, but their work was really finalized in 2020. Mozilla Firefox also has completely blocked all third cookies already as of 2019. So both Mozilla and Apple are really leading the charge here. Google, who owns really the lion's share of the market with their Chrome browser, they're following suit as well. They have pushed their ending of third-party cookies off a little bit. Initially, that was slated for this year. So we would have seen that coming in right now, but they've actually pushed that to 2023. So what they're looking to do from the Google perspective is they're looking to try and find a balance between consumer privacy, but also the advertiser and the marketer's needs, which is why they pushed that off another year. There's been a number of initiatives that they have been working on to try and figure out how to accommodate that balance. And that's why they've been putting that off. So now that we've kind of rehashed what cookies are, and which I know many of you are already familiar with, but I want to make sure we're all starting from the same place. Let's talk a little bit about what's driving these changes. Why has the industry been moving in this direction? And there are really two main factors that are driving this change. It's a combination of consumer demand, which the market is responding to, but also regulatory changes that are shifting the grounds underneath a marketer's feet. So the first part of that, though, is that consumer demand. Traditionally, consumers have not been aware or concerned with how their data is being used. However, this has really changed over the course of the last decade. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, which gained wall-to-wall news coverage, opened consumers' eyes to how widespread their data collection really was. And beyond that, and more importantly, how it's being used to manipulate people, how it's being used in more nefarious ways. Beyond just that, though, between 2017 and 2019, Statista reported that there were over 4,395 different data breaches that put over 832 million records at risk. So this obviously impacted how consumers began to be aware of their data, of how that data was being collected, and how that data is being used in sometimes beneficial ways, but also sometimes in very negative ways. So according to the Internet Society and Consumer International, 69% of consumers today are concerned with how their personal data is being collected in mobile apps. And according to a recent report by KPMG International, 47% of consumers have significant concerns about new data hacks, while another 51% are concerned about their data being sold. And that really is what's starting to drive companies like Apple, Mozilla, and Google as they're listening to the consumer's demands. And I think that we all probably can recognize that on a personal level as well. We start to recognize when we are getting those retargeted advertisements. We start to recognize when you may say something about a certain product. Next thing you know, you see it in Facebook, and you're like, well, that's weird. Well, they're not all listening, but there is a lot of data collection that has consumers much more aware of what's going on, has made consumers much more concerned. Now, obviously, there is the legal perspective of all this and what's impacting that. And that's what I want to talk about next, is not just how consumers are driving these changes, but the regulatory framework as well, right? So this isn't just being driven by the market, but governments have also taken notice too, and have acted to protect the privacy rights of consumers. Since 2016, we've seen a tidal wave of new regulations going into place, both internationally as well as domestically. And the most well-known of these internationally is GDPR. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation for the European Union, and it was put into place in 2018. I think most of us are probably familiar with it, but if we aren't, we don't have time to take a deep dive into all the nuances of this regulatory framework. However, in essence, this regulatory system that was passed seeks to put power back in the hands of the individual. Businesses are now required to get consumer opt-in to be tracked. They're required to get consumer opt-in for email correspondence. And consumers now have the right to demand access to all of their data. And beyond that, consumers have the right to request that all of their data is deleted. So it's really a shift in the industry. And as we all know, this doesn't just apply to companies located in the EU. Anyone doing business with an EU citizen has to be compliant with these regulations. Now, following the footsteps of the EU and GDPR, other countries have passed similar legislation. So Pogge in South Africa was recently passed. It's a very similar framework to what we saw with GDPR. In Brazil, they recently passed the LGPD, which is their version of GDPR. And even domestically, we're beginning to see these changes take place. So in California, they recently passed the CCPA and have actually recently just passed an update to that regulation. Virginia has passed the VCDPA, and Colorado has now passed the ColoPA. So this is not just being driven by the marketplace, it's also being driven by government regulations. And that's really important as we are planning going into 2022, going into 2023, going into 2024, what our long-term strategies are going to be, right? Because not just the removal of the cookies themselves, but how we collect data, how we capture contact information, those things themselves are changing. A lot of folks historically have used tools like Zoom Info, for example, which is a great tool. But as we see more and more of these regulatory changes take place, as we see the industry react, a lot of those tools are going to start to fade into the background because the regulations around what data is available, how you can collect that data, are going to be being more and more strict. So going in from that, there's more, right? These changes aren't unique to just tracking your devices. These changes aren't unique to how you're collecting this. The changes are also impacting the email industry as well, right? So bygone is the era of being able to purchase lists, for example. While this is still technically legal in the United States at a federal level, the email industry itself has been taking their own steps to protect consumers by essentially banning purchasing lists for years. Now the question is, how do they do that, right? And if you can't actually ban it, how do you go about ensuring that this type of thing doesn't happen? Well, this starts to happen with spam traps and block lists. And that's something we're going to take a look at right now. So for those of you who aren't familiar with a spam A spam trap is an email address that has been designed to catch spammers. And when I say spammers, I'm utilizing the industry's terms. I'm not calling anyone a spammer. I'm using the industry's terminology here. But these are email addresses that are either inaccurately spelled. So if you think of gmail.com, Gmail or gmail.com email addresses, which are obviously inaccurate, are often used to be a spam trap. They also take old, out-of-date email addresses that have been reassigned and are now being leveraged and monitored by these block lists to capture people who are not keeping up with best practices. And they are also creating what they call pristine spam traps to capture, these are email addresses that have never signed up for an email list. They're now utilizing those to capture people who are purchasing those lists. People hear about blacklistings all the time, but people don't really understand how you get blacklisted. Well, you get blacklisted because you're emailing to a spam trap. That spam trap is monitored by a company like Spamhaus, for example, who then adds you to their list because you're not following those best practices. That's how you start to get blacklisted. That's how you start to kill your domain reputation. And that all is really important as we are moving into the next phase of first-party data and understanding what the best practices are, right? So what are the best practices? How do we get around that? And what can you do as a marketer? Well, first and foremost, we need to talk about making sure that we're using segmentation appropriately, that we're looking at people who are engaged with our content, we're looking at our frequency, and we're getting people to opt in, right? One thing we know about a spam trap, for example, is they're never going to engage with email content. So what we should be looking at is engagement, not just did an email address bounce, but are people engaging with our content that we're sending them? If you've sent someone 20 to 30 to 40 emails and they've never opened one, that's someone we need to remove from the list. Maybe we can look to rehabilitate our relationship with them in the future by getting them to engage in a re-engagement campaign. But for the moment, they shouldn't be part of your ongoing list. Now, this is going to impact, obviously, list size, but it's not all about quantity. It's about quality of the contacts in your database as well. So opens and clicks. If you're using first-party cookies, then checking to see who clicks through and engages with your website. Engagement really is king here when we're talking about ensuring we're not getting to spam traps. And we should all be focused on driving more engaged recipients by ensuring proper segmentation and not overwhelming that frequency, right? So we want to establish a consistent cadence that doesn't overwhelm someone. Now, with regards to that, some of the things that we should be thinking about with regards to segmentation is what are people telling you they're interested in, right? As you go to collect lead information, make sure that we're asking them, what type of content are you interested in? What level of frequency are you interested in? And then make sure that we're targeting those engaged individuals. So really, real briefly, how did we get here, right? Over time, there's been an erosion of trust. The data collection and how that data has been used to manipulate consumers has been escalating rapidly ever since the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And suddenly how you engage with websites, what apps you use, and how the information that you are giving to these tech companies suddenly is becoming very real for consumers as well as governments. As consumers have become more aware and concerned, we've seen governments respond in kind, which is evidenced by the recent regulations that we just kind of walked through. The reality is that many marketers have taken liberties to solicit consumers' data and then turn around and spam them either via email or with irrelevant information without their permission. So data has been bought and sold, and consumers no longer have trust. And one thing that we do know is that most consumers rely on trust for a brand before they're willing to make a purchase, before they're willing to take that next step in the relationship. So this isn't how digital advertising and email marketing started out, but over time, this is once one company or one group began to misuse the data, it began to spread like wildfire. So these short-term fixes have obviously hit some short-term goals, but they have resulted in the need for these changes from an industry level that we're starting to see. The industry, the changes in the industry, in my opinion, really shouldn't be seen as something bad or something that's going away. Rather, this is an opportunity to refocus and to relearn and to learn away bad habits, right? So we should be, again, generating content that invites people to engage rather than forcing our messages upon them. And we really need to reevaluate what we're offering in that content. Are we offering something of value that people are interested in engaging with? If we aren't, we need to reevaluate that, because ultimately content is king, engagement is king. And if we can get people to engage with the content because we're speaking to who they are as individuals, then that is what's going to help us progress and help our businesses grow in the long term. So getting into this, it all circles back to the importance of first-party data and what first-party data strategies you can begin to incorporate for your organizations. So what can marketers do? Again, leverage that first-party data. Brings me back to that first point. Inbound marketing. If you're not generating content that helps customers solve their everyday challenges or discover opportunities that actually compels them to lean into your brand and to learn more, it's time to revisit the strategy. Once they start to lean in, once they start to naturally engage, your inbound traffic will increase and yields will have higher, see higher yields with better intent to make a purchase with you. That's opposed to those people who may have simply opened an email or received a phone call from a sales rep shortly thereafter, but they're not super engaged, right? I think it's really important to understand here as well, brand marketing and the impact that brand marketing can have. You know, for years, Xerox owned the market with regards to copying, right? Whenever in the 80s, when you wanted a copy of something, you asked for a Xerox. They don't ask for a Xerox anymore. You ask for a copy. Why? Because they stopped branding themselves. People don't ask for a soda oftentimes. They ask for a Coke or they ask for a Pepsi because these companies have branded themselves. So making sure that we're leveraging what first-party data, getting people to opt in, getting people to get us those durable identifiers, but also remaining in front of them. Also ensuring that we're branding ourselves in a strong fashion so that when people do think of a certain product or service, they think about you as an organization. Just as important is permission-based marketing. And that's what we're kind of seeing with these people-based durable identifiers, is that permission-based marketing. This is a great opportunity to move past the quantity over quality. As I said before, you know, list sizes will probably decrease, but nurturing fewer quality leads over more low quality leads will ultimately increase conversion rates and increase conversions at a higher rate. Segmentation as well. You know, that's what we talked about just a few minutes ago, but segmentation is really important. I'm convinced that if it were easy, more companies would naturally segment their audiences in order to get them the information that really is in tune with who they are and what their needs and interests are. But let's face it, in the day-to-day, it can be hard simply because many tools force a one-size-fits-all tactic. So one of the things that we're most proud in giving to our customers at SharpSpring is the ability to segment our audiences. Now, regardless if you're using our solution or any other solution, segmentation is really important. Again, understanding what information are people interested in getting, giving them that opportunity to give you that information. And when they go to opt out, giving them an opportunity to opt out of specific content as opposed to everything. Let's make sure that we're giving people those options to tell us what they are interested in so we can then leverage that within our list, right? As we go to build lists, let's make sure that we're utilizing things like tags, or if your solution that you're using enables you to use custom fields, utilize the information to better segment those audiences. That way you can see higher engagement rates and higher conversions. Also, again, content is king. So when we're targeting that specific list, let's try and use things like a merge variable. That's what we call it in SharpSpring. Or if you're using a different tool like MailChimp, it might be called a token, right? Pulling in the little bits of information from that individual contact and personalizing the content to speak to that individual. Dynamic content. If you're using a system that enables dynamic content, leverage that. Make sure that we're not sending an email to 10,000 people that has the same message. Rather, let's make sure that of those 10,000 people that are getting this one email, they're getting versions of the email that are more reflective of who they are and what their interests are. That will, again, increase engagement, which increases your inboxing, which can help increase your ultimate conversion rates. And then at the end of the day, you know, what we're looking for is to get those people to engage. So what we're looking at here, again, ensure that consumers are sharing what they're interested in, set up your preference centers, and focus on inbound opted-in consumers utilize the first party data that you can capture. If you're using Google Analytics, see what pages people are engaging with the most. If you're using a marketing automation solution, see which pages individuals are engaging with, because you can tie that first party cookie, again, first party cookie data, to that individual contact record and begin to leverage that to make sure that we're segmenting the experience that people are having. So I know I went a little quick, everybody. I tend to talk fast, but I kind of want to open up the floor to questions. Hannah, do we have any questions that have come in thus far?
We don't have any questions from the group, but I have a bunch of questions for you. So
okay, great. Let's get into it.
Yeah, on the topic of first party data, we keep talking about data. And sometimes that word to me, it's not very tangible. So in regards to email marketing, like what are the kinds of questions and like fields that we should be asking when we're doing email marketing, when we're asking to collect data on people? Like give me some examples of what is best practice that we are collecting on people to build up this kind of first party data list.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, email address is something I think we're all very clear about. That's a very important data point to capture. And it's important not just from the perspective of being able to send them our marketing content, which obviously is key, but also email is a reliable, consistent, personable identifier. So as we go to start marketing campaigns more generally, let's say thinking about tools like Google or Facebook, we can oftentimes take that email address and provide it to that solution, and then they can match that for our targeted marketing. So first and foremost, email, just because of that, from that perspective, is really, really important. Not even talking about the email marketing itself, but being able to take that email, match it with a known individual that Facebook or Google or LinkedIn may have, and being able to serve them that content. So email is huge. Obviously, first and last name. It depends on what industry you're in. If you're B2C versus B2B, these things are going to shift a little bit. From a B2B perspective, what market are they in, right? What services do they need? What are they looking for? So I would also look at what role they are within an organization from a B2B perspective. What I communicate to a sales engineer as opposed to a CEO, those should be different messages, right? So we should understand what role they have within their organization. We should understand what vertical their organization lies in, what industry. We should understand what their preferred mechanisms of communication are. And then we should understand what their pain points are. So a little about us section in the form to understand what are your needs. Because again, if we're delivering a product or service, we should customize that as much as possible to the individual on the other side. Let's minimize the discovery in a first call, and let's try and capture as much information in those forms and in our engagement as possible. So from a form collection standpoint, those are important for a B2B perspective. B2C perspective, I would look at things like frequency. How often do you want to receive communication? I don't know about you guys. My Gmail inbox is loaded with crap all the time. I have so much junk in my email that I don't pay attention to because these providers have not asked me about frequency. Instead, I signed up once and now they hit me with every single email that they can imagine. So ask about frequency. How often do you want to hear from us? Ask about their specific needs as a consumer. What are you interested in learning more about? Let's leverage that specifically. So if you're offering a service, if you're offering a specific product, learn about what their pain points are and incorporate that into your segmentation. Because as we go then to segment those audiences, again, we can be more targeted with either our email outreach, SMS outreach, or our targeted advertising.
Oh, that was great. So along this same line about collecting that kind of data, do you have any recommendations? So some people have an email marketing platform that they work with, which is awesome, and others might not. So do you have any tips when you're for a company that's first starting out collecting all of this first party data? How do you really get started with the segmenting element of it, whether that's with just like a CRM or maybe it's an Excel doc? What kind of tips could you give for somebody starting to segment this data so that they can actually use it to find out, put people into buckets of like, they're interested in golfing or they're interested in staying in the summer months, right? Like, how do you have any recommendations to start that segmentation process from square one?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, every marketing automation CRM solution today are starting to offer free versions of their software. So for a very low cost or no cost at all, you can get started with a CRM and start to leverage that. Now, again, not here to sell SharpSpring, but SharpSpring, HubSpot, all these different types of platforms are starting to offer freemium versions, which are going to be really effective because those oftentimes will incorporate very simple things like forms, which natively push data into the CRM. So I would absolutely get started with a freemium version of a CRM so you can A, start to collect the data, B, familiarize yourself with how to leverage a CRM. You wouldn't believe how many folks that I've worked with who don't understand how to use a CRM at all. They just use Excel, they just use CSVs, and they don't really understand how a CRM can be impactful. So I would say out of the gate, get a CRM, even if it's the free version of a CRM. Let's start there, because that is going to help set you up for long-term success. Once we have that CRM, we can begin to, again, understand things like what data we need to collect. Another thing I would say is identify your ideal customer profiles, right? What is an ideal customer for your organization? What specific things are you looking for? What specific products or services do you offer? And what attributes about an individual would match with that? That's really important as well, because that is going to now dictate, as you start to collect that information, how you segment your audiences, right? What's our ideal customer profile? What attributes about this individual or about this organization make them a good fit? And what are they interested in? So we can then begin to segment, target, and communicate, get the right message to the right person at the right time. So first step is get that freemium CRM or a cheap version of a CRM just to begin to understand how to leverage it, begin to segment the data in that in a more efficient manner, because they, again, oftentimes will come with free form builders, free chatbots, things along those lines. And then identify your ideal customer profile and begin to build that out in the CRM. So as you collect that data, you can use it appropriately.
So Tim, expand upon that last point, because I think that's an important, it's a great point. I think it's something that I think, folks on this call could maybe use a little bit more detail when you talk about that. So when you've got the CRM, we're talking about like a customer relationship management tool, CRM. And when we talk about these forms, a lot of times those forms, like when you talked about it, natively lives on our websites, right? So whether that's a Visit Idaho website that has a, you used the term earlier, kind of the preference center, which is, I think is a great way to phrase that, where somebody can kind of talk about who I am as I'm opting in to receiving emails. And as Hannah had mentioned, for a tourism agency or a destination marketing agency, we're talking more about what activities are you interested in? Are you traveling as a family? Are you traveling as a, retired couple? Are you traveling with an RV? What seasons are you interested in? All of those types of things. What areas of our state are you interested in visiting? And that can all be built out in these forms through the CRM tool, which plugs in to each of our different websites. And so, I think what's interesting there is, just talk a little bit more about kind of the process in sort of developing some of that, because I think connecting those dots for folks is going to be really important if we, as you think about all the way from that journey of visiting a website and giving consent and providing interest to this back-end component where now you're talking about developing dynamic content based on those preferences that have been communicated.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit, because I think that's a really important topic to go through. I think this starts to tie into what I call the ideal customer profile, or ideal customer profiles, right? There may be multiple, but understanding what those personal preferences are. So let's say, for example, I have someone who comes to my website and they are a rock climbing enthusiast, right? Well, let's give them that option to say, okay, you're an individual or a family. You're an individual. What are you interested in? You're interested in rock climbing, you're interested in maybe kayaking or whitewater rapids or something like that. As we start to identify those first factors, we have to start to think, what are the secondary factors that can help us be more communicative and more effective, right? So again, the individual, maybe they're into rock climbing, whitewater rapids, they might be into zip lining, that kind of stuff, right? Those are things that we should start to build out. So individuals, what are you interested in? Families, what are you more interested in? Oh, maybe you are more interested in shows. Maybe you're more interested, maybe you have little kids. If you have kids, what ages are they in, right? Start to build that profile of the individual or the family, so that as you start to build that profile, you're more effective in what you're communicating. A lot of the CRMs, as well as the email marketing platforms like MailChimp, have the ability in their emails to pull little bits of information from the contact or individual record into that email. So as we are starting to think about these various types of individuals that we're marketing to, we should try and break them down into various subcategories and get as granular as possible. Again, what's your interests? What time of year do you like to travel, right? That can help us understand when it's appropriate to start to email back to them and start to target them with communication. Because a family may be more interested in traveling during the summer. Their kids are out of school. So, okay, I know you have young kids. Your kids are out of school from July or June to August or whatever that time frame is. Let's make sure we incorporate that into the frequency. And when I talked about frequency earlier, that's a really important topic. It's frequency. We don't want to overload them. So let's make sure that we understand when there are opportunities to travel might be. Individual like myself, I don't have children. My wife and I can travel basically anytime we want. So for us, it might actually make more sense that we want to be able to go skiing with just the two of us, as opposed to having to wait till the summer. So learn about that audience, figure out married or single, kids, no kids. What type of activities are those kids interested in? What age ranges are those kids in? It's not going to make a lot of sense to take kids to Disney World when they're 17 and 18 years old for Floridian, right? My kids are probably less interested in Disney World than they were when they were 5 or 6. So let's make sure that we understand that age bracket as well, because those kids are going to have different interests at different age levels. And what we communicate, what we are offering, is going to vary based off of these various factors. So this is a very long answer to your question, but the short version is focus on, it's kind of a common sense thing. I like to think of it as myself. What would I be interested in, right? As an individual, what am I interested in learning more about? And what kind of cadence do I want? Let me now try and take that logic and apply it to other people. What would they might be interested in? What are the various options that we have? And then based off of those, well, what additional resources could we provide as well? Then let's leverage that in things like the email marketing, in the merge variables, in the list segmentation. And if you're using an automation engine of some sort, in the automations to filter them down the different pathways. Because as you begin to build out these profiles, you can be more effective in, again, communicating the right message to the right person at the right time.
And Tim, too, what I think is really interesting, you had made this point earlier, but there's a lot of data that we could ask about people, and that could be very, very overwhelming. So I think a good place to start is to focus on who is your ideal customer, right? Is that a person who is a family? Is that somebody who's, a young couple, right? Like, who is the ideal customer you're trying to bring in? And then build out your questions around that, around identifying who that person can be, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming of just all of the data that we could potentially learn on somebody. I mean, there's only so many form fills that we can provide that people will actually fill out. So I think a good place to start is just to really hone into, who your customers have been, who are the people that are coming to visit and staying at our hotels and, booking Airbnbs and things like that. Who are those people? Who do we really want to bring in? And then build that plan around that type of audience and understanding more about them.
Agreed. And one thing that I'd add to that as well is not just the form fills, chatbots. People are more likely to engage with a chatbot than they are to want to talk to a salesperson, than they are to want to fill out a form. So if you can incorporate a good chatbot and set up a good chatbot flow on your website, people are more likely to engage with it. I mean, just think about when you're trying to even get in touch with tech support. How often would you rather just get on a chat with someone than have to call in and wait on hold for forever, right? So incorporate chatbots into that marketing strategy as well, so that you can set up different automated flows and different next questions and steps based off of what they told you before. Capture the lead information and use that in your segmentation. All right, any other questions I can help address?
I've got one more question that
Yeah.
you brought up a little bit earlier, and I think it's something for my own personal curiosity, but also some direction for folks who may be attending today too. You talked a little bit about sort of the ability to check your first-party data against whether it's in via Google, and if you're going to be running an AdWords campaign, or whether it's via Facebook or some other organizations you may be advertising with. Talk a little bit about that process. Like, how does somebody go about if you've got a good quality list, you've got form fills, you've got CRM, you've got a little bit of segmentation. How does somebody take that next step, or kind of what should they be thinking about in terms of checking that? So then, you're engaging with some of those other ad platforms, utilizing your data beyond just, a good email campaign.
Yeah. So again, ideally, these people are opting into your communication first and foremost. And so we're assuming that they're giving us good data. But when we want to go to run a new campaign, let's say, for example, we have a CRM. We've identified our target ideal customer profile for a specific campaign, right? We might have and again, if you're in the travel and tourism industry, you might have a couple of different types of profiles that you're interested in. But let's say we have our specific ideal customer profile. We should export that into a CSV, and we can partner with folks like Google. Google's a great example. I have a partner I was just working with last week who exported a list of 10,000 folks from our solution, and they got really granular with it. They looked at, now this individual was a private school, but what they did is they looked at everyone with kids in a certain age range, right? Between, I think they were looking at their elementary school specifically they were trying to promote for. So they looked at everyone within a certain age range between people who said they've got kids between 5 and I think it was 12. Kids within a certain area, right? So leverage zip codes or address information. They then built a list of all of these people with these specific criteria. They exported all that to a CSV and they went over to Google and they uploaded that CSV and basically had Google match, because Google will now match basically, here are the email addresses. Okay, well, we have some data on these individuals. And they ran a very, very targeted campaign. And it's actually ongoing right now. They were running a very targeted campaign to get those people to come out to an open house. Now, after the first week, they're already seeing something around a 3% click-through rate, which for an initial advertising campaign, very good at click-through rates. They were already seeing very high conversion rates from that. They're seeing more people. And what they're doing now is they're taking those people who have clicked through and they're segmenting them out again, right? These people have clicked through. Let's segment them out. Let's now put them into a different cadence, whether that's email or drip sequence. Let's incorporate them over here. And the folks who haven't engaged yet, they add them to a different campaign target around the same idea. Maybe it was the collateral that didn't work the first time. Maybe the timeframes didn't work. So now let's segment those folks out. Let's give them another opportunity for a different open house and bring them back in. Now, obviously that's specific to a private school, small school. But what my point here is as you start to take the data and really start to segment your audiences based off of what we know about them, you can incorporate that into that initial digital advertising. But as those people engage from that advertising, we want to segment them out, take them down our new cadence, because they are raising their hands. They're saying, hey, I'm interested. So that's the person we're going to try and get, maybe with a salesperson, maybe with a person who's going to book their time or whatever that might be, right? We're going to get those people segmented out over here. Those other folks, okay, our call to action didn't work. Let's think about a new call to action. Let's think about a new offer. What else could we do to potentially get these folks to take that next step, click through, convert, and raise their hand, say, yes, I'm interested? Because that form of engagement is the best way to get those conversions. Again, Bygone are the days where we just buy a list and send an email to 50,000 people because we can. It's not about quantity anymore. It's about the quality. And the more targeted we can get with that, again, whether that is via an initial advertising campaign, whether that's a retargeting campaign, again, leveraging the solutions that Google Ads offers, as well as Facebook. Facebook can be very effective at times. Now, I know a lot of us probably have some horror stories of trying to use Facebook as well. I personally have tried to use Facebook for some advertising, and some of them have been very effective and some have been really terrible. I'm not sure what, it's got to be user error. I have to assume it's user error, but I don't know. We'll see. But Facebook can be a great tool as well. Instagram is super popular right now. People really who have been maybe fed up with Facebook and Twitter because they become so divisive, they love Instagram, right? Because Instagram is more wholesome. It's pictures of people's kids and their dogs and the travels that they had. Great. Let's use Instagram targeting as well. And let's incorporate that into our marketing scheme and get in front of those people, again, with that message. When they engage, segment them out, get them down a new cadence, whether that, and again, one thing I mentioned earlier was frequency of communication. Another thing is type of communication. They might not want email. Get them to sign up for an SMS campaign. Get them to engage where they want to engage. So it might not just be email marketing as well. It could be SMS, because that's another place where people are going, is wanting to get an email update. My wife gets text updates. My wife gets text updates from a local store all the time, and they're always telling her they have another sale. So she waits for a week to 2 weeks before she goes to that store to get the text update saying, this is the sale. And then she rushes over there as quickly as possible. That's a fantastic way to say, hey, you may not be interested in email marketing. Maybe you don't pay attention to your phone. Would you like text updates? We've got great offers that we might be able to offer you with regards to half off your hotel stay, or 25% off this tour of this canyon, or whatever that might be. So learn about what those interests are. Start to take those folks, export their data from whatever CRM you're utilizing. Partner with Facebook, partner with Google, partner with these different tools to begin to hit them with specific targeted advertising based off of what we know about them. And then as they engage, segment those folks out. Those who don't engage, let's try a different mechanism to get them to engage.
Oh, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the benefits, I mean, last week, folks, we had a presenter from Sojourn, who is a company we buy media from for Visit Idaho. In the same way that, the way Timothy described, exporting your data and working with a Google or a Facebook. In the travel vertical, we're fortunate that we have groups like Sojourn or like a TripAdvisor or like an Expedia, that we can do that same process. And we're working with media providers who are targeted in our travel space. So we're not, obviously Google is still a big player and somebody that we should all be working with there, as are, the social media companies as well, where that makes sense for you. But we're fortunate that we have some pretty travel specific media partners that we can work this same process through. Is that correct, Hannah?
Yeah, I would say I don't think I've ever worked with a vendor that does not let you give them data and be able to match it with what they have. So any OTA, like Matt said, Sojourn, they will all happily be like, we'll build our marketing lists off this data. We can build lookalikes off of the data, where they take our marketing list and then they go out and find people that are very similar to that audience, but are new prospecting audiences. So pretty much all, I think, media vendors can really leverage that data.
And honestly, I think that we're in the middle of winter for you guys right now. Obviously, I'm in Florida, so I'm not going to brag too much. We're in the middle of winter for you guys right now. So start to plan for the spring and think about the fact that A, people have been cooped up for the last few months because it's winter, but B, also they've been cooped up for forever because of COVID. So they want to get outdoors. If you have outdoor activities that families can come in and enjoy, that's a great opportunity going into the springtime as well. So plan out your marketing efforts around that as well. If they like outdoor activities, they're telling you about that. Think about what activities you can have that are outdoor, that people feel safe about, because again, a lot of people are COVID weary at this point. And this is an opportunity, especially in a state like Idaho, where you have such beautiful outdoors, great hiking, whitewater rafting, all of that kind of stuff. This is a great opportunity to get those folks to come out and get out of their houses for a little while, because they're starting to lose their minds from COVID and in the winter. So those are two things I would definitely think about going into the spring.
You're talking about our bread and butter, Timothy. I'm going to consider that an opt-in for our email program. So we're going to
consider it.
I don't know how official that is, but we're going to consider that an opt-in. So
yeah, well, Florida is beautiful, but it's very flat, and you can get tired of the beach at some point. So I'm really looking forward to getting out to the mountains again. I haven't been to Idaho yet. The last time I've been to the Rockies or the out west was Colorado. But Idaho has long been on my bucket list, and hopefully we can make it a reality this spring into summer.
Well, you've made some friends today, so we appreciate you. Come on out and see us anytime. So I don't have any more questions. Hannah, do you have any more questions?
No.
I don't see any questions from the group. So unless there are, I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Timothy,
well, I just want
to
I just want to thank you, you guys, for having me as a guest today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I want to thank everyone who attended today. I know some of this was a bit of a recap from prior sessions with regards to what cookies are and everything, but I hope that the information was applicable to your organizations. It made sense, and it helps you guys as you're thinking about going into 2022 in your marketing strategy. So appreciate the opportunity, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Hannah.
All right.
Thanks, Timothy.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tim.
You guys
everybody.
all have a wonderful day.
Bye.